Okay, welcome. Welcome to session, or the Symposium 14. I'm Jutta Buschbohm. I'm one of the co-chairs of this session, and Libby Elwood is our co-chair. The session's layout is, as you already know it from yesterday, have 10 minutes talks, 3 minutes for discussion, and 2 minutes for change. We are very happy, we're very appreciative of the donors of the conference. Without them, the conference would not be possible, and especially the diamond donors. It's very important that they support this conference and make it possible. I think this is what we need to start. We have as you might have seen, we were kind of like in a little flurry because we have a reduced set of talks. We knew we had one person who couldn't come in the end, and we will do an extended discussion. We also are missing still one recording. So what we are planning to do, and that actually works quite nicely, we would like to do a survey about the digital extended specimen. So this is a symposium of the international partners for the digital extended specimen. And we would like to ask you, what do you actually know about the digital extended specimen? What are your thoughts? We would like to get your input into this. So if you can, and if you are interested, please open it. You can either do the QR code, or you could go to menti.com and then use this access code, and you should be able to access the poll. So Libby is going to present the first talk, and then depending of if we find the next presentation, the video or not, we will go through the poll together. Sharon. I have the feeling we can wait and we can do it together then. So you can focus on Libby's talk. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for coming so early in the morning, and I give the stage to Libby.
It is nice though. It's there if you need a distraction though from my talk. So let's see. I'm gonna just set myself up a little bit here. And figure that out. Okay, wonderful. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out to the first talk of the day here. I'm excited to share with you a recent project that Beacon, the Biological Collections Network, has been working on. I'll start with a little background about how it emerged, how it's evolved, and what we hope to accomplish. And our latest effort, the Biofair Data Network project, and its goals, as well as the proposed activities and timeline. This presentation represents the work and opinions of dozens of people, and I'd like to acknowledge that here at the start, and thank you all who have been a part of Beacon and contributed to the Biofair sessions. I know we have a few of you in the audience here, so I also welcome your additional comments as time allows. So without further ado, the Biodiversity Collections Network, affectionately known as Beacon, is a group that is dedicated to helping to move forward initiatives that facilitate and expand the utility of biological collections. It emerged from a 5-year research coordination network grant from the National Science Foundation, awarded in 2014, and although the first grant ended some time ago, the work of the group continues. Beacon was funded by the American Institute of Biological Sciences, Spnhc, and Natural Science Collections Alliance, but has over 38 other supporting organizations. Our primary objective is to support the collections community and promoting new uses for collections and their derivative data, and to further our community's relationship to others that are also committed to documenting and preserving life on Earth. The Beacon Steering Committee is composed of representatives from both living collections, including zoos and culture collections, as well as preserved collections. We also recently grew our community to include 6 early career and emerging professionals to ensure that those voices are a part of our work and to support them as they become increasingly involved in our communities. And those are the last 6 on the screen there. The Extended Specimen Network builds upon the success of specimen digitization by creating a robust, linked web of data integrating biodiversity specimens and their associated primary data with derivative and complementary data, as first envisioned by Mike Webster in 2017. This network of specimen-linked data, once fully implemented, would expand data utility for broader audiences and would facilitate and inform an ever-growing range of complex research questions and fundamental research endeavors. Key to the success of the Extended Specimen Network is the involvement of the global community in this effort and also engagement with biological data communities whose domains are in these second and third extension orbits to create the needed data linkages. Realizing the Extended Specimen Network vision will involve additional collection and digitization of specimens and derivative data, what we call born digital documentation of specimens, but also continued retroactive specimen digitization and data editing, developing a more robust means of linking and integrating data, and creation of enhanced data portals and cyber infrastructure to increase the utility of these data for research and education, institutional and community infrastructures to enable all of this, and sustaining this network through the development of a data literate workforce. So a lot of work to do to bring this into reality, but we are working on that as a group and also recognize that individuals and research groups and institutions are also doing this at other scales. In the last year, we were awarded funding to launch the BioFair Data Network with a goal to engage an expansive set of current and prospective partners towards building an integrated, open, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable data network, hence BioFair. We are currently in the listening session phase of the BioFair project, and that's what the rest of this presentation will focus on. In the second year, we will host a workshop during which we will develop recommendations and a roadmap for the BioFair project, and I'll speak more to that in a minute here. So this is our general timeline. We went through some training, and we're in the listening session stage now. The virtual listening sessions, each about 2 hours long, focus on exploring the current and ongoing community needs and future goals of the contributors, managers, and end users of biodiversity data with the objective of identifying information gaps and common goals. Those groups that you see listed in the blue box there are the communities that we specifically engaged and reached out to. And we focus our discussions on questions related to what is the current status of your data resources, what are your plans for future development, what are your greatest challenges, how could integration with other data sources advance your goals? Are there existing conceptual frameworks for integrating data in this domain? How would you approach aligning with other frameworks? And what do you view as the best path forward integrating your data with other sources? So we recognize that we're coming at this from a biological collections standpoint, and that we want to work more closely with these other communities who have challenges and needs of their own. So how can we best understand all of those and then work towards better integration of the, not just the social aspects of the communities, but also the data aspects. The first listening session that we held was with the federal agency group, and they have some unique aspects to what they do and some unique considerations. And the following slides will all be organized in this way. The session leads and key domain partners are listed up there on the top. The leads were part of Beacon or are a part of the Beacon BioFair group. And then as part of each session, we engaged 1, 2, maybe 3 individuals that represent important organizations within this domain, and then worked with a number of additional individuals whose logos, from organizations whose logos are listed at the bottom there. And then for this particular group, we recognized that federal collections are different and therefore a focus of a dedicated session here for several reasons. They're often tied to a particular agency mission as opposed to being curiosity driven or profit driven. Their long-term support comes from congressional legislation. As such, their funding structure is really different from other groups and can last potentially decades. Federal collections are often used for regulatory enforcement and may require more secure storage. So we therefore identified some challenges and then some needs from this group. Again, I'll go through challenges and needs for all of the groups in this layout. Challenges experienced by federal collections range from access and cybersecurity issues to issues with proprietary information and infrequent updates to data storage and aggregation systems. Some of the needs that were brought up include a framework for prioritizing data to be included in an integrated data network, harmonized standards and policies across agencies, ways to ensure data can be aggregated from multiple sources, and challenges related to legacy data and permissions. And each of these sessions, we just finished these, we've been doing these over the last couple of months, we just finished them. So we are, what I'm presenting to you is essentially the raw data from these sessions. So we're kind of excited to share this with you. And also to mention that you'll see some interesting similarities among the groups that we're also going to pull together over time. So next, the genetic and genomic data session noted that NCBI, the National Center for Biotechnology Information, is a key stakeholder here. And they also recognize that integration of sequence information with specimen records and benefit sharing from the use of digital sequence information on genetic resources are of particular concern. A few of the challenges this group is facing include a lack of metadata and persistent identifiers, lack of consistency of voucher information, and metadata duplication rather than integration. They identified several needs, such as funding of persistent identifiers, development of tools for data integration and data curation, and standards for sequence information cited by journals. The One Health group identified their stakeholders as zoos, museums, agencies, and disease-focused nonprofits with sample collection focus on local infrastructures and specimen data that are accessible outside of the museum community. Some challenges faced by those in the One Health field include handling specimens with different biosafety levels, lack of consistent documentation, and lack of communication between museums and veterinary communities. They identified central organization, real-time assessment of zoonotic pathogens, funding beyond just the disease du jour, and as some of their needs. The ecological data session recognized data integration within ecological data, as well as between ecological data and other data types, and great potential to improve standards, ontologies, and translation tools as the major current considerations of the community. And challenges faced by this group include data collection that works well for integration with other types of data. Existing systems may not be able to handle emerging data types, such as bioacoustics data and camera trap data, and some data types require special consideration, like participatory science data. We need a common language and flexibility in data models, translators across different repositories, investment in standards and ontologies, and data tracking, a roadmap to chart a path forward. The climate and environmental data group considered these questions. Is species occurrence data derived from biological specimens included within the definition and scope of environmental data? What changes are needed to improve the interoperability of all of these data types? And what outcomes can we envision? Challenges include missing metadata, researchers needing additional skills to work with large environmental data sets, and difficulty documenting the loss of an absence of a species. And as such, they need up-to-date catalog of resources, best practices and training opportunities, and an improved culture of data sharing. So I'm going through these pretty quick, but I'm happy to spend more time on things later. So that brings us to our most recent session on biodiversity informatics, which addressed data integration and the critical infrastructures needed to make this happen. Some familiar logos there as well. This group considered the existing missing tools used or needed by the community. And some of their challenges that are integral rely on, integration relies on humans. There's a lot of variety in data types and variability. A social commitment is needed from data submitters to standards and best practices, and a lack of consistent identifiers and attribution mechanisms. And this group would like to explore potential collaborations, develop standardized best practices, and address challenges of data ownership. All right, after that whirlwind tour of our listening sessions, our next plan is to start to develop this final workshop in the next year. And as part of that, the steering committee, in partnership with some of individuals from those listening session communities will organize a 2-day virtual interdisciplinary workshop to dive deeper into discussions about a collaborative path forward. The goal of this workshop is to bring together a more expansive, non-conventional configuration of potential user communities to work together to develop recommendations and create a roadmap that outlines the gaps, needs, and actions needed to build a fair, open, integrated biological and environmental data network. Discussions will address how the various representative communities work together to augment our initiatives with the ultimate vision of integrating data. What we hope emerges from the Biofair Data Network project is a commitment among the communities we have identified to work collaboratively toward the creation of an integrated data network and a plan for how such a network might be created and managed. Hopefully, a group will emerge that is willing to work toward the implementation of such a network. Specific products include a statement of engagement articulating a set of agreed upon principles and collaborative agreement, a roadmap that outlines gaps, needs, and actions, as well as one or more publications. And I just want to sort of summarize all of this. If you get nothing else from this talk, perhaps consider that our main goal from this was an initial step to bring some of these communities together to broaden our discussion table, as it were, with some of these communities and to build deeper relationships that hopefully stick over time. And in that sense, work towards this Biofair data network. And we hope to do that through not just the listening sessions that we did, which were just an initial step of identifying some of these key people, but to then identify the synergies that we all have, some unique obstacles or hurdles that some of these communities face, and to then chart a path forward. So you can share your thoughts here at that first website, beacon.aabs.org/biofair, and we have a basic forum set up if you wanted to put any of your thoughts there. And if you're interested in attending the workshop, as I mentioned, we are looking for folks from these various communities to continue the conversation. That's a long URL. Feel free to take a picture or find me later and I can give that to you directly. I did take an extra minute here knowing that we had this next session of time open. So thank you for indulging me in that. And I think with that, I will open it up to questions. Is that the next step? All right. I think, oh yeah, fair. Mm-hmm. Oh, I was going to say, I think if you have a question, please come up to the mic. If you are online, put things in the chat. And if nobody's there, are we on Zoom to identify that? I'll hop on Zoom in a minute to look at any questions that might be there. And then, as Jutta said, our next phase of this session, our next time block for this session will be a discussion about the digital extended specimen and work that is happening in the global community to advance and make aspects of this a reality. So should we dive into discussion? Yes. Great. Did you have a particular slide for that, or can we go back to your other one with the QR code? Can we go back to that first slide? Is that something you do, or?
Can we share the? No. How do we do this? Does everybody have the link to the Menti poll, or do we still need to share it another time?
Maybe let's share it to see if we can. Can we go back to the first slide?
Wait,
yeah.
wait. I can share it through the screen share.
Okay.
Okay. Can we do the screen share? Can we do the screen share with the computer? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we have 10 minutes to go through the poll. So unfortunately, I know the presenter who was supposed to present here, she's traveling and something must have gone astray. So we have this time slot to do something else. And so we have prepared a poll, and we would like to go through about the digital extended specimen, and we would like to go through it with you. So you can access the poll through, I should do, no? Okay, so you can access it through menti.com, and then you have the access code, or you can access it through the QR code, hopefully. Is everybody set? Then I would switch to the poll. I saw the nodding, so. Okay. So we are interested in what do you know about the digital extended specimen. So we would like to get some feedback from you, because we have been working for it for the past 3 years. So the first question is, how would you rate your current level of understanding of the following? What is a digital extended specimen? And so there is a scale from 0 to 6, likely. I can't see it. 5? Okay. So, and actually the responses that you are giving us I think are pretty good. And the second part of this question is, what are organizations doing to realize DS? And there seems to be an impression we could do more, or we should do more, depending on how you see that. So that's very interesting feedback. So then there's a little list of questions. The question is, so where are we actually right now? And it seems that most of you consider the DS, the real implementation of the DS, really important for your work. That's really good to hear, very encouraging. With regard to the digital environments that you have to do your job, that seems most of you are pretty happy in this crowd that is here in this audience. We have done this poll before, and I mean, we are here very kind of like techie crowd. So most of you seem to be quite happy, not very happy, but quite happy with the environment. When we have done this before, it looked a little bit different. So that's interesting to see how different communities perceive the situation right now. And the question with if we are on track to reach our goals, that seems to be, we don't know. So we could certainly improve that. And then there are 2 questions about, do we actually address the concerns and expectations? And first is about infrastructure providers. And so as a provider and data and infrastructure provider, you seem to say, now, actually, you could do better. And I think that's very important to understand for us. And I think we need to find out what is it actually that you need. And maybe you could give some feedback on that. And the second half of it is, as end user, as data user and tool user, you seem to be, it's still kind of like split half-half, but you seem to be more happy about if we take your concerns and expectations into account. I would be interested, would you provide us feedback on, like, as a data and infrastructure provider, what we could do better? What is missing for you? what are you, what concerns do we not take into account? Yeah, could you go to the
Yeah, and this is solely my perspective, but I think the people in this crowd are super users. They really understand this problem. But from my perspective, there are thousands to tens of thousands of people who could benefit from this who have no clue about why this is important. And I do not do a lot of research around the digital extended specimen. I'm sort of interested in the people data aspect of it, but I can't say that I've been reading a lot of use cases to paint the picture to encourage the end users who might be PhD students at a small institution to understand why this is important and to sort of be part of that groundswell. So,
thanks. Okay. There was somebody else who, no? Okay. Okay, so going to the next next question. We got lots of responses, and so I'm not going to go through that, but ecology seems to be really important. And otherwise, we have a whole cloud, and we will go through it in more detail after the session. And so here we are asking you to rate. So what is the most important impediment to making progress? And then rate these proposals that we have given you. And so the highest impediment or the most important impediment is funding. Next one is communication. And then it's implementation, technical limitations, planning, science policy, and other. So if I might try to interpret that, it's really funding and communication that are really important. So we need to reach out much more to you and need to communicate much better. So, and we got lots of responses from you about gaps that are still out there that we need to take into account. So we're starting to be on time, and we will go through your responses in detail after the session. I would like us to continue with the next session. And I think this was the, okay, so I'm going to stop the poll here because otherwise we are over time. Would like to switch to the next presenter. Okay, which is Alessandro Russo, and we will present virtually. So that will be, thank you very much.
Hello everybody, I'm Alessandro Russo from the Italian National Research Council, and I will present our ongoing work in the context of the European MareGraph project. This is joint work with my colleagues Giorgia Lodi from the same institution as me, and Joanna Goley, Marc Portier and Katrina Ekster from the Flanders Marine Institute in Belgium. As many of you perfectly know, all stakeholders working with biodiversity data need high-quality information, and when it comes to marine species, high-quality biodiversity data is made available by well-known authoritative information systems. These systems include the World Register of Marine Species, known as WORMS, which is a register of names of marine organisms together with taxonomic classification, geographic distribution, bioecological traits, and other information on aquatic organisms. We then have marine regions, a gazetteer of georeferenced marine place names and areas, and EUROBIS, the European node of the Ocean Biodiversity Information System, which deals with distribution data on marine species, up to specific observation of specimens in a particular place at a particular time and related measurements. Since years, these systems are all managed by the Flanders Marine Institute and support various application and use cases. For example, they provide data to other well-known biodiversity information systems such as the Catalogue of Life and the Global Biodiversity Information Facility. This is good, but we can do better and we can do more to make these three foundational high-value datasets more findable, accessible, interoperable and reusable. This is what we are doing in the context of the MareGraph project, where we want to semantically enrich and interlink the data from WORMS, marine regions and EUROBIS to build an open knowledge graph on marine biodiversity data. And we want to do this by relying on the standards of the semantic web, which means defining reference data models as ontologies in the ontology web language, producing and publishing linked data as RDF, so the resource description framework, and make it queryable using the SPARQL query language. So what we will produce covers all main dimensions of interoperability. From an organizational perspective, we are defining an open process and methodology for creating and managing semantic assets, which means ontologies and controlled vocabularies, as well as linked open datasets. Concerning semantic interoperability, we are defining a network of ontologies for representing and interlinking marine biodiversity information as we have it in our three reference datasets. And then, with semantic data models in place, we will produce and publish the data from WORMS, marine regions and EUROBIS as linked open data, so that people and application can have access to it through standardized APIs, which include SPARQL, as mentioned before, and linked data event streams, an emerging paradigm for publishing and consuming linked data on the web. A reference ontology was already defined for marine regions, and its data is already published as linked data event stream. So we are now focusing on WORMS and EUROBIS, and I will briefly focus on our work in this direction. To build our data model, we follow a consolidated methodology, graphically represented here. Trying to summarize, ontology engineers and domain experts work together so that the domain and the data to be represented are well understood. The analysis of the state of the art, taking into account existing models and standards, helps as well. We then go through an iterative and incremental process. First, requirements are defined in terms of use cases and competency questions, which are natural language questions that help framing the scope of the ontology. While we clearly start from the actual dataset for our requirements, we use an open approach, also involving the community through thematic workshops and webinars, where different needs and perspectives can be discussed. The requirements then drive the design and development of the ontology models. In this stage, we graphically represent our data models and, where possible, we take advantage of reusable modeling solution known as ontology design pattern, and we also evaluate the possibility of reusing existing foundational and domain-specific ontology, as identified in our state-of-the-art analysis. Then, after an internal testing and validation phase, which may lead to adjustment and revisions, our ontology models are published in a dedicated GitHub repository. This allows us to involve again the community through a public review process, so everybody can contribute through issues and comments. By following this process, we produce and publish the models part of our ontology network, together with the associated documentation and metadata. Let's make this a bit more concrete by considering the information about marine species. On the left, we have a selection of the competency questions that we identified when working on the data from the World Register of Marine Species. As you can see, we have requirements on taxonomy and nomenclature with questions about taxonomic classification of species, or the synonyms for a scientific name, or even vernacular names in different languages. We then also cover identifiers, which play an important role in biodiversity informatics, If you are familiar with worms, you know that all names have a persistent and unique so-called AFI identifier, but identifiers from other systems are considered as well. We then move to information on species distribution with questions about the habitats of a species or the type locality, so the place where a type specimen was found. Other questions focus on the invasive species in a given region or generically concern the areas where a species occurs. And then in our selection we have attributes and traits such as the body size of a marine organism. In the last question we also see that information sources are mentioned. This is an important aspect in general, as all data in worms is rooted in the scientific literature. Existing data models and standards have already addressed at least some of the aspects discussed so far, and you can see some of them listed on the right. We have been obviously considering Darwin Core and the taxonomic concept schema, part of Tdwg's biodiversity information standards. We have done other data models, and some of them follow the semantic web principles, such as the Bioschemas initiative and the Open Biodiversity ontology, while others are defined in other formats, such as the Catalog of Life data package. With all these requirements in mind, it should be easy to understand the structure and content of our ontology network for representing information on marine species. So far, our data model includes the 5 modules you see here. We have a common top-level ontology module for representing base cross-domain information, such as identifiers, sources and references, units of measure, and so on. We then have 4 additional modules, each covering a specific topic. So we have a module on nomenclature and taxonomy, one concerning species distribution, where, as you can imagine, we established the link with the marine regions ontology as we talk about where species occur. As discussed before, we then have a module for representing heterogeneous attributes and traits from habitats and body size to the UCN category of a species, as reported in the well-known red list. We didn't mention it before, but available information about species also includes media objects such as images and videos with related metadata like authors and licenses. We thus have a dedicated module for these two. These modules are interlinked to form a network and either directly reuse or are semantically aligned with existing models listed here on the right. We mentioned some of them before, like Darwin Core and Bioschemas, and we can see additional well-known resources such as schema.org, SCOS, and the Environment Ontology. The integration between datasets becomes even more evident if we then consider species occurrence records as managed in Eurobis. So here we have to deal with information on where and when marine organisms are observed, with the World Register of Marine Species that provides the backbone for species names used to identify the observed specimens, and marine regions for geographical locations. This core information can then come with additional measurements or facts about the observed organism, about the habitat and environment with abiotic measurement and parameters, as well as details about sampling techniques, use devices, and so on. Observation and measurements can then be scoped in the context of specific events, such as the overall observation cruise and the sampling activities that took place during the expedition or campaign. To summarize and conclude, our overall goal in the MareGraph project is to produce and publish a semantic knowledge graph that integrates and interlinks the data from worms, marine regions, and Eurobis. We have our models for marine species, and we are in the process of revising and finalizing them so that they can be used for producing and publishing linked data from worms. This will happen by the end of this year, and at the same time we have just started the open collaborative process for defining the ontology modules for representing species occurrences, so the data from Eurobis. By the end of next year we will have also this data published as linked data. Our knowledge graph is starting to take shape, hoping that all of you in the community will benefit from it, reusing the ontologies, the data, or linking your datasets to the entities in the knowledge graph. If you want to know more about our work, including our upcoming workshops and webinars, I invite you to have a look at our project website, our GitHub repository, and our deliverables on Zenodo. In particular, on GitHub we are publishing the data models and control vocabularies that we produce and use, and you are free to contribute by making observation or providing comments and feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would like to open the floor. I know Alessandro is online, so would like to open the floor for questions to Alessandro.
There's one in the chat which I can present, and I know that Alessandro can also reply in the Zoom chat, but just to open it to the full in-person room here as well. Alan Stenhouse says, I'm keen to adapt this work for more general use and would be interested in comments from anyone/everyone on this. So Alessandro, I don't know if you wanted to address that. Are we able to pipe in his voice to this? I could.
Can you hear me?
Can we hear him?
Or if
hear me?
Alessandro, if you wanted to just reply in text in the chat, I am happy to read that out loud as well.
Yeah, I can try to reply directly if you can
Oh,
hear me.
We can
Yes?
hear you now. Yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Yes, it's not really a question, it's more an invitation to provide other comments, but I can say a few words about the possibility of generalizing our work. So I've been talking about marine species, but as you know, most of the things I've been mentioning applies to biodiversity data in general. It's not limited to the marine environment. So we hope that most of the work can be adapted to other use cases and general domains that are not constrained to the kind of organism we deal with in the systems I mentioned in my talk.
That is very inspiring to hear. So that it is possible to expand your system to a wider range of habitats and environments. Are there more questions?
There's another one in the
Okay.
chat if we like. Teresa Mayfield Mayer says, love this. I would be curious to know how much time and how many people are involved to realize the final result and who will maintain it once it is complete.
Yeah, so we are a relatively small group of people. The consortium is just composed of 4 main partners, but most of the work, of course, comes from past experience from the Flanders Marine Institute, who is managing the 3 main systems, and the institute, so known as VLITS, some of you may know them very well, they committed to maintain it even after the end of the project. So it's not something that will end with the end of the project. They already had this goal in mind, and they will continue managing the data as they do now, also in the linked data version. So everything will be kept up to date even beyond the life cycle of the project.
Thank you very much. Do we have questions here from the room? I'm wondering, okay, there's Sharif.
Hey, thank you for your presentation. I was wondering if you can give a quick example, like how the linked open data and RDF will work with the GBIF ecosystem. So let's say, you know, I have a huge data set from GBIF, and then I have the, you know, the RDF and Sparkle from the graph. You know, how would these two kind of interact?
Yeah, I think the interaction in that sense, on one side, can continue happening as it is now. So the data coming from, for example, aerobes or worms are converted as they are now, for example, in Darwin Core archives and so on. But at the same time, the work we are doing is trying to align our ontologies to the RDF version of Darwin Core as far as possible, at least for many of the entities and properties we are considering. So in that sense, you could imagine deriving the data directly from the knowledge graph, the data I mean that can feed GBIF by providing dedicated queries that can lead you to a format that is suitable for importing in GBIF then. At the same time, there's a lot of work being done in GBIF in terms, for example, of controlled vocabulary that we're going to reuse. So we hope that interoperability will come also through this kind of processes.
Thank you very much. Very exciting. I think a lot of people here are very interested in your work, and please, everybody, reach out to Alessandro and his team. Ask more questions. We need to continue with the next talk, and I would like to ask Rory Edmonds to come, and we continue with the next talk.
Thank you.
Okay, so a little bit of a change of pace here. So I'm here to talk about the IGSN DataCite Partnership. My name's Rory Edmonds. I'm the Samples Community Manager at DataCite. So just to give you a little bit of background. If you don't know about DataCite, DataCite's a global community that shares a common interest, which is to ensure that research outputs and resources are openly available and connected so that their reuse can advance knowledge across and between disciplines now and in the future. And as a community, at DataCite, we make research more effective with metadata that connects research outputs and resources. From samples and images to data and preprints, we enable the creation and management of persistent identifiers, PIDs, integrate services to improve research workflows, and facilitate the discovery and reuse of research outputs and resources. And you can see some stats there of where we currently are. And I mentioned samples there, and samples have become increasingly important in DataCite, and that's through a strategic partnership with the IGSN organization, the International Generic Sample Number. And this partnership has been around or started in October 2021. And the point of the partnership is really that DataCite is now providing the IGSN ID registration services and supporting their ongoing sustainability, while the IGSN organization is implementing and promoting standard methods for identifying, citing, and locating material samples. And the first sort of phase of the project, which was from February 2022 to June 2023, under a grant from the Sloan Foundation, was really about the technical transition. So bringing that PID infrastructure, the IGSN ID infrastructure, underneath DataCite's technology stack, and also bringing the IGSN current membership underneath DataCite as well. And since then, the focus has really been on sort of support and scaling the IGSN ID adoption. So what is the IGSN ID? So the International Generic Sample Number, it's a globally unique and persistent identifier for material samples. And I want to make it really clear here, this can be used in all disciplines and for all material sample types. And as well as individual samples, you can actually use an IGSN ID for collections and aggregates. So you may not want to recognize everything at the individual level, but actually at a collection level, you can do that with an IGSN ID. You can give an IGSN ID to what we call a feature of interest, which is really just the sample collection site, the place where the sampling happened. And the sample has to have existed at one point, but it doesn't have to be persistent itself. So you can actually use it for ephemeral samples, so destroyed, discarded samples. The point is here that the IGSN ID goes on the sample itself. Therefore, you can't use it for an image of a sample. You can't use it for analytical data about a sample. It is placed upon the sample itself. So this is where the sort of subtleties come in. And just to give you a little bit of an idea of the history and usage, actually the IGSN ID has been around since 2011, and it's actually the first ever persistent identifier for material samples. Getting towards 13 million IGSN IDs have been registered thus far, almost 3 million of those actually within DataCite services. So we actually transitioned, obviously, all of the existing IGSN IDs also underneath DataCite. And it has really been trusted and used by major research centers, universities, government geological surveys. It's been endorsed by scientific publishers. What can you do with an IGSN ID? Well, the big point is, and of course this is where it comes in sort of parallel with the DES, is that it really links samples to the web via metadata and landing page. So we're talking about giving a digital presence for a physical object. And because it is a persistent identifier, it does all the sorts of things that you'd expect with a persistent identifier. So we can link samples with datasets, articles for discovery reuse. We can describe and connect the relationships, or describe the relationships between collection site samples, subsamples, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But again, because it's connected to the sample itself, it really helps you with things like your collection management and your sample process management, so you can actually locate and understand what you have in your collection, and you can track things as they move from place to place. So a little bit about the sort of technicalities of registration. Well, through the partnership, DataCite services to register IGSN IDs for material samples is open really to all DataCite members and consortium organizations. We have support documentation. If you're interested, obviously you can contact me about this. But the major point is that because this is now under DataCite, IGSN IDs are now functionally DOIs, digital object identifiers. And that means that IGSN IDs can be registered through all of the existing ways that DataCite services that are available for registration. So we have a web interface, we have APIs, we have what we call service providers that offer integrations with DataCite. IGSN ID metadata is encoded in the DataCite metadata schema. Because these are DOIs, IGSN IDs have a prefix and a suffix resolved to landing pages. The point, a good sort of important point here is we know with samples and they have local identifiers that can actually still be encoded in an IGSN ID as a DOI, because the suffix is completely and utterly customizable. And of course, once you add a prefix and a suffix together, that's what gives you your global uniqueness. Findable IGSN IDs again appear in DataCite services such as DataCite Commons, API queries, and any other discovery services that use DataCite records. The big difference is that we don't currently recognize IGSN IDs at the record level. That's coming. That will come in our next, major iteration of the DataCite metadata schema, where we can have sort of more breaking changes. But at the moment, we can do pretty much anything you would want to do as recognizing an IGSN ID by using what we call an IGSN ID catalog repository. So IGSN IDs must be registered in a catalog, IGSN ID catalog repository, and a catalog repository must be used exclusively for IGSN IDs. I don't have time to get into the metadata here, but if anybody interested, please reach out to me. But the important point is here that obviously DataCite does have its metadata schema, and we've worked specifically with the IGSN organization to create a recommendation for encoding mandatory and recommended properties of IGSN IDs into the DataCite metadata schema. So we've looked at how sample metadata can be included best within the DataCite metadata schema. And one of the things that really was a big sort of part, I guess, of the questions that were asked in the session description was about how we link things. And of course, DataCite DOI metadata really allows that cross-linking and citation piece. So we have what's called related identifier metadata, and that's used to create those links between parent and child samples that are identified by IGSN IDs, citations in resources identified by PIDs, so data sets that have analytical data about those samples, journals in which those samples are cited. You can link those all together. And importantly also is domain and institute specific metadata on the web. So the DataCite metadata schema is generic. It's never going to capture the myriad types of sample metadata out there. But the point is you can actually link the metadata schema that you are using in the DataCite metadata to tell people these are the types of things, this is the sort of information we're collecting. And of course, you can also add people through name identifier metadata. And that includes obviously ORCIDs and affiliation or funding references to link to organizations through RAW. So this means that IGSN IDs, because they're created in DataCite services with a related identifier type DOI, this means they are part of the PID graph and connect, and their relationships with other things with PIDs are all now in the PID graph. And so, yeah, where are we at the moment? Well, we're in the community engagement long-term sustainability phase, as I mentioned. So we're really continuing to support the ongoing needs of registrants of IGSN IDs. We're scaling adoption and use of IGSN IDs across samples communities globally. We're establishing disciplinary communities of practice to support development of standardized methods to identify, cite, locate material samples. So that's really about promotion of the use of PIDs for material samples, articulating use cases within disciplines, subdisciplines, mapping out what the workflows might be in those disciplines, and sample descriptions. So what's the minimum useful metadata profile for a particular type of sample? What extensions are needed depending on the subdisciplines? How can the DataCite metadata schema be enhanced to better support material samples? So, and on top of that, citation of samples is still a little bit up in the air, and so we're really working with the samples community, with publishers, to try and get some sort of consensus on how one would best cite samples, IGSN IDs, within the literature. And again, going back to the session description and the questions that were asked there, I thought I'd just touch upon sort of what the challenges that I've seen have been for increased adoption. There's a lot of interest in this. There's a lot of people that want to do it, but there have been blockers towards that increased adoption. And it may be a bit controversial for this community, but I'm afraid to say one of the things I have found talking to organizations, talking to communities, is that there are poor sample management practices at this moment in time. There are a lack of standardized workflows. There is a lack of standardized collection of metadata. There really are different readiness levels and maturity in domains and subdomains. There's little consensus around practices and metadata needs. And there are still a lot of misconceptions around PID metadata structured according to the DataCite metadata versus rich disciplinary sample metadata. So these are things, this is a barrier we're trying to overcome and sort of educate people. And also misconceptions around the necessary changes needed to established work procedures, naming conventions, data systems. People feel that these things are blockers, and this is what we're trying to sort of educate people on to overcome. A little bit of a bright future, though, and one, again, that comes back to the session description, was sort of how do we see these things sort of coalescing a little bit in the future, or how is this environment going to look? Well, I can tell you that in a similar way to the strategic partnership that we have with the IGSN organization, DataCite's entered into a similar partnership with DISCO, and that's still quite nascent, but it does mean that this idea of the digital extended specimen or sample digital twins, however you want to call them, will be DataCite DOIs. There will need to be some discussion between, I think, DISCO and the IGSN organization as to how these things all fit together in the future, but at least we can see that there is this, as I said, sort of coalescing. And that's all I want to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very exciting to hear about identifiers and PIDs. Questions from the audience? Alina.
Thank you. Very interesting. One question. For how long would this project be? It is a long-term project with all the effort that is going to be done. Thanks.
Well, yeah. So I don't think that DataCite is going to change its mind about supporting samples as an identifier type anytime soon. I mean, even before we had this partnership with the IGSN organization, we did have physical object as a resource type, so a research output that could be given a DOI. Obviously, anything that is created is by the very nature of it being a PID, persistent into the future, and of course it's under the robust DOI foundation. So, but I don't see the partnership with IGSN going anywhere. I think it in the future, or disappearing in the future. It is going to continue. And that's my job to make sure and lead that. And again, we have these other partnerships that are coming along as well with, as I said, with Disco. So I think the future of all this is quite bright and interesting at the moment. We're in a really exciting time.
I think this one will be really quick from an online participant, McKenna, who asks, who registers an IGSN? Is it the original owner of a sample?
Yes, has to be the original owner.
I actually would have one question, and that is a researcher who would like to attach PIDs from DataCite to their sampled specimens. How would they actually go about it? Would they need to become a member of DataCite or of an organization? So so how would an individual go about it?
So that would very much depend on whether their organization is a DataCite member or not, because at the moment there are obviously a lot of institutions out there that are creating DOIs. That would then need to be probably a discussion with whatever information service is doing that. But if you're an individual researcher outside of that, there are, for example, CSAR in the US will allow individual researchers to register IGSN IDs through them. They have historically worked with geosamples, but I think they are expanding the range of samples that they can deal with into the future. And I think there will be other DataCite service providers that are going to offer this service. For example, RSpace at the moment is offering, as the first DataCite registered service provider, a way for people to register IGSN IDs.
Great, thank you very much. Okay. So we are moving to our last talk from Lena Struve.
Thank you. There will be some handouts coming out right now, and there are 2 pages, so they have different information on the 2 pages. First, before I start talking, I'm just going to do a personal plea, and that is, please consider how you format your slides so that they are visually accessible to everybody. I have seen so many examples of slides that are actually unreadable, even for people that see well. I don't see well anymore due to a catastrophic thing that happened in April. So think about it, do you have white text on black background? Do you have blue text on white background? Do you have small text? Do you have lines that are tiny, tiny, tiny? All these things. It's like we have forgotten how to make good PowerPoint slides, okay? So please, everybody, think about this before you make your slides for any kind of organization, presentation, for your peers or for your students or for whatever. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to talk about the true value of herbaria, and some of this is going to be completely obvious for you, but this is something that we really need to talk about. So I'm not sure if all of you know about what has happened at Duke University in the United States, who decided that we don't need our 900,000 specimen herbarium anymore, and we're just going to give it away. We still don't know what's going to happen to this herbarium that has had active research for over 100 years, 5 full faculty members, and an enormous legacy, including legacy of being a depository for research material from foreign countries with foreign agreements and many other complicated legal issues. And of course, they just say, well, take it, anybody can take it, but nobody can just take 900,000 specimens. So this has led to a lot of difficulty and discussions, and this has also led to us thinking about, well, how can we help save the herbaria and other natural history collections around the world when it comes to that we talk about the value of these specimens. They are not just cabinets with dusty specimens, like a headline in New York Times said recently, right? Okay, so what do I do?
The mouse.
Just click. Okay, so herbaria. Many of you botanists will know Vicky Funk. 20 years ago, Vicky Funk put together a list of, it called 100 uses of herbaria, but it was actually 72 listed. This started kind of like on a napkin in a bar where they started listing things, and then it turned into a list that was published in the ASPT, American Society for Plant Taxonomists newsletter. And here is a QR code, and the QR code is also on the handouts that you're getting. This was a summary of known uses at the time, but also potential uses at the time. And we need now to educate everybody again. This list has been used, but it's not updated. So first of all, our collections, and this is not just herbaria, but any other biodiversity collections, they are highly endangered, invaluable, and irreplaceable. And when you are talking to a university, they say, well, what is this worth? Or when you talk to UPS, because they have lost half of your lichen collections, they're like, well, where's the catalog where you can order more so we can see how much it would cost you to order more of these specimens? And I said, well, there isn't one, right? They found it in a warehouse in Kansas, by the way. This is a money problem, this is an education problem, but this is primarily a communication problem. Because we need to tell them. We can't assume that they will know, but it's up to us to tell them. So there are many ways of doing this, and what we are planning to do is to really think about how we can enhance the value by telling people what the herbariums can be used for. One thing this will lead to is increased funding, because you need to include the funding cost for the digital and the physical collections in any kind of research grant that uses those things. And talk to the researchers then, so they can add a portion, and then that will be fed back to you. So what has happened in 20 years since Vicky's list? We have digitized a lot of collections around the world. When she wrote the list, that was just at the beginning. Now we have all this digital data that has made these specimens discoverable. It's not just the digital data that is sitting there online. It's actually that now people can know where to go and look at the physical specimens. And we forget that often. We just talk about the digital data as being, its own kind of data set. No, it's linked back to the physical specimens. So you can go and get the DNA. You can go and look at the hairs. You can go and find new species. You can go and look at things in detail. We have many more refined methods to look at the chemical, the physical, the physics, the chemistry of the specimens, and the DNA, of course. And we can make this enormous, complex geospatial analysis and temporal analysis that weren't possible before. And also, we have this potential for a wide networking of collaborations around the world. Also, remember that the collections we have in herbaria are not just flat plants, okay? They're not just dead, pressed, and flat. So we have liquid preserves, pickled specimens, where you have three-dimensionality and anatomy work that can be done on it, frozen DNA and tissues, seed and wood collections in some herbaria. Many herbaria have microscope slides, but not all of them, but those are also hidden. They are still hidden. Few places have scanned the microscope slides and shown the anatomy. It's very time-consuming, but it's something that really is important, because many of those slides is the only specimen in the world that shows, for example, how the ovary looks like in cross-section. Ethnobotanical artifacts, very important. Some collections have special collections like Peabody, but many herbaria have just a little few collections that you haven't really looked at yet. Labels, the labels have all kinds of information on them that are not just about the plants. And then sometimes photos of people, places, collection practices, and field notes and maps. Okay, so now we have these new research and data tools, the new imaging tools. This is an example of micro CT images of fruits from herbarium specimens that shows not just the surface, but also the inside of the fruit. Who knew that we could do this? And guess what we can do in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years? We do not know. We need to have the physical specimens to be able to do this. An image is fine to discover, to look at, but it's not going to be enough to actually do a lot of the research we're going to do in the future. So physical specimens are still needed, and they are really critical. We have to remember this, and we have to tell them that. And I know people, botanists, that say, well, now everything is digitized, so let's just get rid of the herbarium. So let's make sure that people understand this. Some examples. So just a few examples here. This is an example where a specimen or specimens are important beyond just systematics and taxonomy. These are specimens where they have looked at the atmospheric carbon isotopes to see the different kind of weapon testing, nuclear weapon testing that were done. These were annual plants. They lived 1 year. You could check the level of those isotopes in those plants in that area and see how it went up and how it went down. And that was due to, downfall of isotopes from nuclear weapons testing. Another one, which maybe is not, beyond what we usually think about it or we take it for granted, is the international collaborations. The international collaborations that are fostered by herbarium collections or any kind of natural history collections are huge. We have these connections with grants, with education, with sharing of data, open access to our data, and people-to-people contacts, not just institution-to-institution contacts. Okay, so Wiki's List 2.0, why are we doing this? Well, we want to make a new summary of uses, and the difference here is that these are not just uses that we can think of, but now we want to have documented examples of all the uses that we list, so that there's going to be a use, like forensic botany, for example, murder cases, and then either a media story or a lesson plan or an actual scientific article or an article in New York Times, right? So those kinds of extended uses go far. They go to art history, they go to IPM, they go to all kinds of things where we are using herbarium data, and in our case, herbarium data, but you can just adopt this whole idea for any kind of collection that you're working on, to really show that the value is not just for this little tiny scientific subgroup, but for the whole of humanity. This will be important to raise funds. This will be important to create awareness. This will be important to put a name on what we do so that people that are not botanists, that are not scientists, understand that these are important things to preserve, develop, and use, and get excited over. So how do you contribute? Well, there is a QR code. It goes to a Google form. On that Google form, you can submit any kind of example that you know of. This can be linked to anything. It could be, we ask you to just link to whatever source you have. This is going to be aggregated into a big database. This is a worldwide project, so we look for examples from anywhere in the world. And this is then going to be developed into some kind of resource, which we don't know yet how the shape or form this will take, but it's going to be an easy access where you can download, like I want everything that has been used for, say, legal things, anything that has been used for conservation, anything that has been used for education, anything that has been used for, say, indigenous people's rights, right? So we are working on this. We're looking for collaborators, especially when it comes to societies that want to collaborate with us on this. And we're also looking for people that help us to think about what's the best user interface that we can develop and how this can be consistent and be added on continuously as we go on. We are just starting with the data gathering phase right now. And I would thank our societies that are supporting this. We are doing this for free. We have no grants, we have no funding. It's blood, sweat, and tears, right? This is it. And we are happy to take any questions and ask all of you to share this QR code beyond here and into your institutions and your networks. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining this session. It's very exciting to have you here because it's a very data-focused session, but without the physical samples and the social infrastructure that herbaria provide, all our data is nothing. So I'm really happy to have you here. Questions from the audience or from the chat? Yes.
Are you also drawing on examples from the uses of the digital representations? So like a trolling of GBIF citations would be appropriate too, to see what types of, nice.
Yes, so, but we're trying to do the beyond the systematics, right? But if they are using the digital data that comes from herbarium specimens, absolutely. That we're including the digital as part of, it's just a way to discover and aggregate data, you know.
All right, well then you have a lot of citations to troll through in GBIF.
We're working on it. We're also not trying to do everyone right. We're looking for example, you know, references, and we're looking for those references that are open access so that they will be accessible and not be behind a paywall for say that a small herbarium in Indonesia or Harvard or whatever. Anybody should be able to find something in here.
So, yay. I was thinking about this a long time ago too, the need to update that list, and also to think about how it's possible we expand. I'm not asking you to do that. I'm saying we need to do this across all collections, right? So this recent thing we talked about pathogens, and that's obviously a part of the plant conversation. So there's living collections, right, or tissue collections, where they actually maintain sort of the plants that don't have the disease and the plants that do have the disease, and they have to periodically sample to make sure that the pathogen's still there, and that in the ones that supposedly are the controls, the pathogen didn't somehow get up in there either. But they maintain that knowledge. And there are other collections now where we're learning bats and birds and others where they're discovering those two have viruses or some other thing, right? And so this notion of uses to track potential prevention or mitigation of the future, name your favorite pathogen problem. So how can other collection types benefit from what you're doing, and ask the same kinds of questions so that we can, as a broader community, do the same kinds of things and learn from your experience to do this. So taking Vicky's work out of a sort of list idea, right, to publish a sort of static list, turn it into something that's community-based, that more people can contribute to in a way, so you can keep it to be a living, breathing thing, and then think about how you can connect this to other disciplines.
Right, so the living, breathing thing that we're aiming for is, it's not fully formed yet. Yes, but of course, anybody from any other non-botanical, you know, subject area is welcome to contact us and get whatever formats and forms and everything that we're using for this, and just take it on and just modify it for your own thing. We couldn't do everything. We only have to focus on a subset of things. The other thing you were talking about was that this living, breathing thing, it will take a commitment from, for example, a society to take this on, keep it on the web. This we have not developed yet. So this is what we first right now, I said we're in the data gathering phase. So this is like the first set, but it will happen. It's not going to be one of those projects that die. Okay. Yes.
No question exactly, but a few comments in the chat that I'd like to read out to you. So James Macklin says, great talk, Lena. With you 100%, Miss Vicky's energy, I'm sure I can think of something. So hopefully you'll hear from James soon. Alan Stenhouse says, should be able to process the citation list with an LLM to extract structured data for the DB. And then he says H5N1, NE1, suggestions. And then Teresa Mayfield Meyer says, this sounds like a great spinach project.
Thank you. And I was going to say the reference list is on Sotero, and Andrea sitting in the back is managing that. So we are thinking about that already, how to actually have all the references in an easy format for export and sharing. Any other questions?
I'm just going to make a comment. If you do not want the pieces of paper, please hand them back to me or Lena, and we'll gladly recycle them or use them again. But you can also feel free to take a picture of them and then give me the paper. Thanks.
Or bring them home and post them at your institution. Yes.
Hi, Lena.
Hey, Sharon.
Just a quick one to support your not wanting to do it outside of a society or a group that has a more longevity than just the volunteers are working on it. And also to caution, don't build a website. Websites are notorious for disappearing over time and somebody won't support them. Yep. So if you can use Zenodo, GitHub, or something that is established that other people can get to.
Yes.
Absolutely do that.
Yes. I'm with you 100%.
That's where I was going with that.
Yeah. Yes. Any other questions?
Hi, Lena. My name is Diego. I work as the curator for the TI Herbarium of the University of Tokyo here in Japan. Thank you for the talk. It was very interesting. My question goes, it's more, I would like to hear your opinion. Herbaria, as you know, depending on the place, the country, the treatment towards herbaria is a bit different. The difficulties, the needs are quite different. And I guess when we are talking about what are the values of herbaria, it would be interesting also to take in account this kind of locality and how people perceive herbarium there, what are the needs. So I wonder how much data you have already in that direction and what you think about it.
We don't have a lot of data in that direction, but it's very important. It's something that is a little bit of a side discussion because it's very different in different cultures and in different legacies in different countries, right? So, but that's, I think it's very important we can learn from each other and really help each other to understand what kind of arguments and what kind of justifications you can make. So that's, I think that would be a great to have like a separate kind of sources for that and discussion about that. And I welcome all your input on anything of this. Okay, before we end, I'd like to make a shout out to the talk tomorrow by Megan King right here. She's from Chrysler Herbarium that I'm the director for. She's going to talk about how we ran the herbarium for 8 years. We have digitized the collection 100% by having over 200 interns, student interns. So the Herbarium Army is what makes our herbarium work. And they have donated over 25,000 hours of work time to working in the herbarium. So those of you that are afraid of involving undergrads in a herbarium with irreplaceable, invaluable specimens, please come to the talk and hear about how you can do that and how you can adopt it for your own herbarium. Thank you.
So we come to the last part of our session. We are already online. I would like to try to wrap up the session. We have a few minutes before the session closes. We have heard from, trying to synthesize what we have heard in the session is, we are starting to link both on the social side. We are building networks. We are really reaching out to the community and between communities. We are starting to have a persistent universal identifier infrastructure, which we talked very long about, and now it's starting to really settle and we're starting to be able to use it. It's one of the foundations for linking our data. We have heard about great approaches towards building ontologies, vocabularies, linking the technical linking side and technical networks. So the question is, so what are our next steps? Where do we go from here? And so two questions that always seem to appear. One is, so how do we make this persistent so that it continues? And the other one is, how do we scale up? And my pet use case is always global monitoring for the protection of biodiversity. So how do we really scale to a global scale? Do we want that or not? But so these are, from my side, two questions that I would kind of like pose to the audience. Hear from you. What are our next steps? What do you think is important? Since the screen share already happened, these are thoughts about how to go forward that have been evolving in the international partners community, specifically with Libby Elwood here and Eva Heffner from Berlin Botanical Garden. So we are thinking about, so one topic that always comes up is funding. How can we actually generate funding to support scaling and persistence? So there are thoughts about designing a business model for our community. And then if we are discovering a business model or several that work for our community, we also would need to think about governance and organizational structure. So you see that on the slide, but I would like to open it to you, to the floor, both here and online on Zoom. What are your thoughts about what are our next steps? What are we going to do? Deb?
Hi, everybody. I hear that chuckle, those of you who know me. One thing I see at a very low level that I like is, from my own experience, I'm starting to get asked questions that make me really happy. And these questions are, Deb, in our community, we've recognized, and this is two things. One, we've depended on one person to do this job for 20 years. In this example is more like a nomenclatural example where somebody is maintaining a list of all the new nomenclatural acts for a particular discipline-specific group. And they're recognizing this isn't very sustainable. And they're stressing out, right? That person's career is, they're going, I don't want to do this anymore, find somebody else. And I ask them, do you want to do this the same way you've done it for 20 years, or would you like a new way? And the analogous example I'm seeing is we have recognized the challenges that email sometimes offers. It's okay, but sometimes it leaves people out. It requires you to answer the same question over and over again. You forget to hit reply all kinds of problems with email. So they're starting to ask for what are other ways we can communicate with each other. So they're actively asking, help us move our community to other communication structures. Add a Slack, add your favorite Discord, add something that is a more open, equitable network within their own, in this case, discipline-specific group. But this has been a huge move forward towards making it possible for more people to both contribute and to have agency with each other when it comes to learning new things and saying, I already know how to do this. So it's very exciting. It's a need. They don't know how to do it, but they're actually asking for that. Rather than when I ask them, when we're going to build these new websites for you, how are you going to ask for help? Oh, we're going to have email. I'm like, really? It's a 2-year conversation it took me to sort of lead them through realizing, no, they really don't want to manage their issues via email. So that's at a very low level, organizational governance structure.
Thank you. And we need to start somewhere. I mean, we need to start at the local and then connect it to the global. So it always needs to be both. Yes, please.
Just for impression, I'm from a local museum, local Harvard, and belongs to Osaka Museum of Natural History. And I find the concept of the digital extended specimens was applicable to not only for the Natural History Museum, but also to the other kinds of museums. In Japanese society, many kinds of museums has developed in the economic situation, so that they want to express their value of their collections. So not only that is not only limited in the natural history. We are also in the case of such kind of situation, but this concept of how to expand the extended specimen is based on the value of biodiversity. Well, that is very important because, this is a biodiversity community, but I want to make some connections with other kinds of the collection for the other kinds of museum people who can connect with this activity in the future. So, yeah, that is very good for the present situation for us and for the case of Herbarium. But I want to make some place to connect to the icon community or something like that.
Thank you. I think this is a very important point, and that is also we are very, like in this conference, we are very focused on biodiversity. We have heard about marine biodiversity that is often neglected in our land-based communities. But there are also many people who are working actually in the cultural field or the arts field. And maybe you should, I'm going to make a plug for Gary Motz from Yale University, who is actually building a meta infrastructure connecting biodiversity museums with art, history museums, so the humanities. So it is also happening, and this is kind of like what we are looking forward to. Thank you, it's very important. We are kind of like reaching, no, please.
I'm just going to be a little bit of a devil's advocate here, and that is that these digital extended specimens are not worth much unless you have the physical specimen. In some cases, like in Rio, when the museum burned in Rio, right, we lost a lot of things, and they had to try to reconstruct from digital. Yes, extremely valuable for discovery, but you want to link it back to the sources, to original sources. To have a funding network that only funds the digital and forgets about the physical, it's not good, you know. So make sure you don't get a competitive thing between the digital and the physical funding. And I'm looking at you, but I'm talking to all of you. So I think it's so important that we not think about that these cabinets now can be closed and shut, and we don't want to deal with them anymore. It's the opposite. This opens up the use of the actual specimens. It opens up the people, the information, everything that is associated with these specimens beyond just the biology of them too. And so I'm not sure this is the way to go, honestly. I think what we need to do is not focus just on the digital extended specimen, but we need to talk about biodiversity collections, period. And this is one component of it.
So this is the one slide version of the concept. And when you read the concept, it says analog and digital collections. Because I'm interested in doing population genomics, and you start to analyze population genomic data, you need to go back to the collections and look at your specimens and decide, is this actually something in my species or not? So yes, big plug for physical specimens.
Also, digital data changes. When you change the identification of a specimen, then that digital data changes, and you have to make sure it gets updated. Yeah. So you are not thinking, you can't think about digital data as being static, you know.
Yes, so it all needs to be included, and that is really a question about how do we scale, because it's hard to kind of like compartmentalize our questions and tasks, and it's hard not like, and we shouldn't go into like siloing back into kind of a silo approach. We are now at the level where we connect our bubbles, our individual bubbles, the analog bubble, the digital bubble, the abstract standards bubble, and the care bubble. So we have reached where we are already over time. Thank you very much for like sharing our break time. Thank you very much, everybody. And especially thank you to the presenters and to our wonderful tech team. Thank you.